What would you do if you accidentally discovered the person you loved most, the person you built your entire life with, was secretly plotting your financial and emotional destruction? What if you had mere minutes to decide, collapse or fight back? This is the story of how a casual drive home turned into a war for my soul, my legacy, and my future, and how I used my enemy's own weapons against them. Before we dive into this story, which is the most personal and painful I've ever told, I need to ask you a favor. If you've ever felt betrayed, ever been taken for granted, or ever believed in justice, then you're going to want to hear this. Stick with me to the end, and if you're on my side, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything. Now, let's begin. It was a Tuesday, the kind of bland, forgettable Tuesday that exists only to get you to Wednesday. The sky over Chicago was the color of brushed steel, and a chilly Lake Michigan wind cut through my jacket as I left the construction site. We'd just secured the final permit for the North Point Residences, a 3-tower luxury complex on the waterfront, a $20 million project, the biggest of my career. My hands, calloused and stained with years of concrete dust and hard work, should have been shaking with excitement. Instead, they were just cold. I'd built Carter Construction from one beat-up Ford F-150 and a dream. Now at 55, I had everything the American dream promised. A thriving business, a beautiful home in the suburbs of Evanston, a daughter I adored, and Margot, my Margot. We'd been married for 25 years. I still remembered the first time I saw her at a company holiday party I was working at in 1997. She was a secretary, radiant and laughing, and she'd actually chuckled at my terrible jokes about drywall and load-bearing walls. I was 32, covered in sawdust, my business finally turning a profit after a decade of eating ramen and working 7-day weeks. She was 23, full of a light that seemed to push back the gray of my world. Our first date at a little Italian place called Bella Roma lasted until they turned the lights off. I told her I didn't just want to build buildings. I wanted to build homes, places where families would make memories. She'd reached across the table, put her hand on mine, and said, "Michael, you don't just construct buildings. You build foundations for lives." I was a goner. 25 years, a quarter of a century. We'd raised our daughter, Veronica. We'd buried parents, celebrated promotions, survived recessions. I thought we were a team, a unit. I was the provider, the planner, the steady hand. She was the heart, the social coordinator, the one who filled our home with laughter and gossip about the neighbors. That Tuesday, driving my now signature Cadillac Escalade, I decided to take a detour. My son-in-law, Daniel, had been working on some legal documents for a property transfer. His office was on my way home. I thought I'd surprise him, maybe take him out for a steak, a belated welcome to the family. He'd married Veronica just 6 months ago, and I was still trying to bridge the awkward gap between father-in-law and friend. As I turned onto his tree-lined street in Lincoln Park, my eyes immediately caught a familiar flash of metallic paint parked at the curb. A gleaming silver BMW 7 Series, Margot's car, the car that was supposed to be in our garage, or at the very least at the high-end mall where she spent her Tuesdays. A cold knot, entirely separate from the lake wind, tightened in my stomach. Something was wrong. This was off script. I pulled over a block away, killed the engine, and sat there. My heart wasn't racing. It was pounding a slow, dull, ominous rhythm against my ribs. Thump, 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 like a funeral drum. I called Veronica. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm near Daniel's place. Thought I'd drag him out for dinner. You around?"
Oh, Dad, no, I'm at the studio, she said, her voice cheerful. She was a child psychologist, had her own practice. Daniel's working late on some big case. He's probably buried in paperwork. You know how he gets.
Right, of course. Okay, honey. Love you.
Love you too, Dad.
I hung up. The silver BMW gleamed under the streetlight like a knife. Working late. Buried in paperwork. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. A lifetime in construction had taught me to trust my instincts. When a foundation feels wrong, it is wrong. I got out of the car, my movements slow, deliberate. I didn't slam the door. I closed it with a soft, precise click. The air felt thick, heavy. I moved like a ghost along the neat hedges of the neighboring houses, my dress shoes silent on the pavement. Daniel's ground-floor office had a large bay window, the blinds half drawn. A sliver of light spilled onto the manicured lawn. I crept closer, pressing myself against the cool red brick of the house. And then I heard them. Their voices, clear and casual, floated through the cracked open window. It wasn't the words at first, but the tone. It was a tone I'd never heard Margot use with me. It was cold, calculating. And then the words began to register. Once the old fool finally signs the papers, it's all ours, everything we mapped out. It was Margot's voice, but stripped of all the warmth and charm I knew. It was flat, vicious. A man's voice, smooth and arrogant, Daniels answered. The timing is perfect. We file in July. Cite irreconcilable differences. Under Illinois law, you're entitled to half of all marital assets, plus, with his income, lifetime spousal support. It's a slam dunk. I felt the world tilt. The solid ground I'd spent my life building upon turned to quicksand. I leaned against a brick, my breath catching in my throat. Old fool. Slam dunk. Margot laughed. A sharp, brittle sound that used to make my heart soar. Now it felt like shards of glass in my veins. The construction business alone is worth over $12 million. Then there's the real estate, the lake house, the investment portfolios, nearly $20 million altogether. My hands were shaking. I fumbled my phone out of my pocket, my fingers numb and clumsy. I opened the voice memo app and hit record. The red dot glowed like an angry eye. Daniel's voice again, dripping with condescension. The best part is his trust. Michael hasn't got a clue. We've been compiling everything for months. Bank statements, property deeds, business valuations. It's all copied. I heard a dull thud. He handed us the keys to his own empire. 2 years, Margot said, and I could almost see her examining her perfectly manicured nails. 2 years I have played the devoted wife, pretended to be interested in his boring stories about concrete pours and union negotiations, nodded sympathetically when he worried about making payroll. My God, the man actually still believes I love him. The words hit me with physical force. Played the devoted wife, actually still believes I love him. 25 years, a life, a love, a family. It all dissolved in that instant, reduced to ash and legal strategy. The vacations to Hawaii, the Christmas mornings, the tears we shed at Veronica's college graduation. It was all a performance, a long, elaborate, cruel con. A twig snapped under my foot. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet evening. Inside, the conversation stopped dead, utter silence. "Did you hear that?"
Margot's voice was a sharp whisper laced with sudden fear. "It's probably just the neighbor's cat again," Daniel said, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. "You're paranoid. Stop it." "What if it's Michael? What if he knows?" "He doesn't know," Daniel snapped, an edge of irritation in his voice. "The man wouldn't notice a conspiracy if we spelled it out for him. By September, you'll be divorced, rich, and free to do whatever you want with whoever you want." I forced myself to stay perfectly still, melded into the shadows and the brick. I didn't breathe. After a moment, their murmured conversation started again, lower now, more cautious, but the damage was done. The bomb had been detonated. My phone had captured it all. I stayed for 15 more minutes, a statue recording its own execution. Then, on numb legs, I walked back to my car. I sat inside, the recording saved, backed up to the cloud. The interior of the Cadillac, once my sanctuary, felt like a coffin. I looked at my hands on the leather-wrapped wheel.
These hands had built a business from nothing. These hands had held my newborn daughter. These hands had placed a ring on Margot's finger at the altar because her own father had refused to come to our wedding. And all I could hear, on a loop in my shattered mind, was her voice. The man actually still believes I love him. And until that very moment, I had. The 15-minute drive home was a blur of traffic lights and screaming silence. I pulled into the circular driveway of the house I'd built with my own hands in 1995. Every board, every Brit, every custom detail was a love letter to Margot, to the family I thought we were. The house felt different. The silence inside wasn't peaceful, it was hollow, empty. I walked through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. The wedding photo on the mantel, December 15, 1997. Margot in ivory silk, glowing. Me in a rented tux, looking dazed and utterly happy. A lie. All of it, a lie. On the kitchen counter was a card from our last anniversary, her neat, looping handwriting in blue ink. "To my wonderful husband, thank you for making all my dreams come true. Here's to 25 more years of happiness. Love always, Margot." The word love now looked like an obscenity. I sank into my worn leather armchair in the den, the one Margot always said was an eyesore, unfit for our company-ready living room. And I let the memories wash over me, not as treasures, but as evidence.
The cracks had started appearing around 2020. We'd won the bid for the North Point project, $50 million. I'd come home that night expecting champagne, celebration. Margot was at the table with an architectural digest and a calculator. Now we can finally buy the Henderson estate on Lakeshore Drive. They're asking $4.2 million. Not a word about my achievement, no pride, only what it could get her. "Margot, I haven't even signed the contract yet. There's the project phase, crew approvals. But the money is guaranteed, right?" She'd finally looked up, her eyes sharp. "The city has to pay." We'd argued for 2 hours. She'd already spent the money in her head. The house, a new membership at the most exclusive country club, new cars, trips, all in the format of I, not we. I'd been too busy with actual calculations to notice the pronoun shift. The demands grew more insistent. The country club became a necessity when the Pattersons joined. Our lake house in Michigan was an embarrassment compared to the Jansons' place. The intimacies of our marriage faded, slowly. Then all at once, I blamed age, stress. Then came the separate bedrooms, supposedly because of my snoring. She'd slept beside me for 23 years and never complained.
Dinner conversations became monologues about who bought what, who had what. Sarah's husband bought her a Mercedes on a whim, she'd mentioned once, slicing into her salmon. Just because he appreciates her, appreciates the sacrifices she's made for their marriage. Sacrifices. That's what she thought her life with me was. And Daniel had become a fixture after he married Veronica, a slick, too handsome personal injury lawyer with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Margot had suddenly started asking strange questions. What would happen if a friend of mine wanted to leave her husband and he was hiding assets? Then came the phone calls she'd taken another room, always book club or charity planning. How many of those calls were about books? I played the recording again. Daniel's voice. "We've been compiling everything for months." Margot's laugh. "2 years I've played the devoted wife." It was all so clear now. Her sudden interest in the business structure, her insistence on joint accounts while maintaining separate cards for emergencies. She'd been conducting reconnaissance on the empire she planned to plunder. She'd made one fatal mistake. She'd forgotten who she was married to. A cold, analytical calm began to settle over the initial gut-wrenching shock. The businessman in me, the negotiator who'd fought tooth and nail for every contract, began to wake up. The hurt man was being shoved into a locked room. The strategist was taking the wheel. I stood up and walked into my home office. This was the nerve center of Carter Construction. 35 years of work lived here. Contracts, permits, reports, agreements, everything she thought she'd quietly copied. But she didn't know about the structures I'd built to protect the company itself. Perfectly legal, but invisible to anyone not looking for them. She'd been rummaging through the display case, oblivious to the vault buried deep underground. I scrolled through my contacts and found the name I needed. Max Carter. No relation, just a lucky coincidence. My CFO, my friend, and the only other person who knew about the protective trusts and holding companies I've established a decade ago. It was time to make the call that would change everything. "Max," I said when he answered, my voice steady, devoid of the earthquake happening inside me. "We have a code kryptonite. I need you in the office now." For the next 3 days, my office became a war room. 2 laptops hummed on the solid oak desk I'd built myself 15 years earlier. The screens glowed with bank statements, legal databases, property documents. Yellow legal pads covered every surface, scrawled with flowcharts, asset lists, vulnerabilities, timelines, leverage points. I shaved carefully. I put on the dark navy suit, the one Margot called so respectable, and my reading glasses, which she said made me look distinguished. It was armor. Max was a rock. "Those optimization structures we set up for tax transparency are airtight," he said, pointing at a complex diagram on his screen. "She'll be looking at the operating company. She has no idea these subsidiaries even exist. The core assets are untouchable." But she hadn't been idle. Her credit card statements told a damning story of their own. Over 8 months, nearly $50,000 had been funneled into a joint savings account I'd never heard of. The recipient? Daniel Shaw. Their financial partnership had started long before I'd overheard their conversation. Expensive lunches, spa days, designer shopping sprees that suspiciously coincided with her book club meetings. A handbag for $8,000, bought the same day she'd complained to me about the price of salmon at the grocery store. Then there were Daniel's vulnerabilities. A few discreet calls to old contacts in the business world revealed the truth. Shaw's up to his eyeballs in debt. An old partner, Victor Vic Morrison, told me over a steak lunch. He lives like he's got a trust fund, but he owes $200K in student loans.
His office rent is astronomical, and I hear he's got 3 subcontractors waiting on payments totaling over $2 million. The guy's a smooth talker, but he's all promise and no payoff. A quick check with the State Bar Association revealed 2 closed complaints about financial ethics, both dismissed, but the stench remained. They had overestimated their victim. They saw a hard-working, trusting husband. They forgot about the man who'd built an empire from a single truck and a toolbox. My phone rang. Veronica.
"Hey, Dad." Her voice was cautious, the same tone she used with anxious patience. "Is everything okay with you and Mom?" My heart clenched. How much did she know? "Why do you ask, sweetie?" "It's probably nothing. Mom's just been weird about money lately. Anxious. And Daniel, he started asking me these strange questions about your company. How the ownership is structured, who controls the assets. It felt like he was fishing for something. I don't know why." My blood ran cold. They were using my daughter. They were trying to mine her for information. "Maybe they're just interested, honey," I said, keeping my voice light. "You know Mom, she likes financial security." "Maybe," but she didn't sound convinced. "Dad, if something really serious is going on, you'd tell me, right?" The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. To tell her that her mother and her husband were plotting to destroy me, that she was living in a web of lies. "Of course, Veronica, but it's nothing, just work stuff." The lie tasted like ash.
If Daniel was fishing through my daughter, their operation was deeper than I thought. It was time to feed them exactly what they wanted to hear. Later that day, my secure line rang. It was Sylvia Owens, the corporate lawyer I'd worked with for over a decade. Her voice was crisp, confident. "Michael, the asset protection documents are ready. When you mentioned a restructuring, I did a deeper dive. There's an elegant solution here." She paused. "I take it this isn't about inheritance planning?" "No, Sylvia, it's more complicated." "Understood. Domestic threats are the most complex. I have 3 clients who've been through this. I know the drill. Everything will be filed by noon. The business assets will be completely shielded from any personal claims. Anyone trying to grab them will find nothing but smoke." By 10 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting in a conference room at my bank, across from Tim Baker, the branch manager and my occasional golf partner. "A full security review on all joint accounts," I said, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany table. "Everything needs to be temporarily frozen until identity is confirmed in person. The whole system, even the family credit cards, no exceptions." He raised an eyebrow. "That's going to cause quite a stir, Michael. May I ask what this is about?" "Better you don't. How long for the freeze?"
Sign these, and within the hour, all account holders will be notified. Access will require a personal visit with ID and a secondary verification. He looked at me with understanding. "This will hit Margot hard." "That's the idea," I said, my voice flat. At 11:47 a.m., it was done. At 12:03 p.m., my phone vibrated. A notification, transaction declined. At 12:50 p.m., the call came. "Michael, what is going on?" Margot's voice was a mixture of panic and indignation. "My card was declined at the club. I called the bank. They said everything's frozen. Do you know anything about this?" Not a word about the secret account. Not a word about the missing $50,000. No admission of her clandestine money moves. "That sounds serious," I said, my tone neutral. "What did they say?" "They said I have to come in person to confirm my identity. It's humiliating, Michael. I was sitting with Irene Schmidt and I couldn't pay." She was genuinely upset, not because her plot was foiled, but because she'd been publicly embarrassed. After 25 years, I knew her priorities by heart. "I'll call Tim Baker," I lied smoothly. "We'll get it sorted out." I, of course, did no such thing.
I went to a construction site where the smell of fresh concrete and the sound of real work grounded me. My phone buzzed all afternoon. Margot, 1:47 p.m. I still can't get into online banking. Is this a joke? Margot, 2:23 p.m. Tim Baker's secretary says he's in meetings all day. Can you reach him? Margot, 3:15 p.m. They even froze the emergency credit card. I feel like a pauper. Each message brought a grim sense of satisfaction. For 25 years, she'd lived in a bubble of financial security that I provided. Now she was feeling what it was like when that bubble popped in an instant. Daniel's reaction was even more telling. My private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Frank Russo, called me. Shaw tried to access that joint account with your wife 3 times. When that failed, you tried to pull money from another account. Looks like your daughter's education fund that he manages. It's frozen, like you requested. Guy's furious, calling the bank, threatening lawsuits, demanding to speak to managers. Typical behavior of a cornered rat who just realized his escape route was blocked. By 6 p.m., the first phase was complete. All joint accounts were frozen, credit cards disabled, automatic payments under my sole control. Margot was left with whatever cash was in her wallet. It was all perfectly legal. A husband protecting marital assets during a potential dispute. The bank would confirm it was all within the rules. But they understood the message. The man they were trying to corner was now playing on their level. The call came at 6:47 p.m. It was Margaret. I knew I was about to hear not manipulation, but raw desperation. It was time to see how quickly allies turn to enemies when the walls start closing in. On Saturday evening, Margaret sped to Daniel's office like a woman possessed. Frank Russo was already in a coffee shop across the street, watching the entrance. Everything was going according to plan. Through a contact in the building, Frank had access to the old ventilation system connected to the accountant's office next door. He fed me updates via text. Daniel, he knows everything. Margaret's voice, tinny through the vent, was shaking. He's locked down everything. I couldn't even buy gas. This isn't a coincidence, Daniel replied, his voice tight, all smoothness gone. He showed up at Veronica's house 3 days ago, right when we were finalizing the strategy. He heard something. How much? Enough. Otherwise, he wouldn't have nuked our access. We have to assume the worst. He probably recorded us. A silence so profound it was louder than any shout. The 2 master strategists had just realized their prey might have been 10 steps ahead the whole time they were smugly dividing his spoils.
What do we do? Margot asked, her voice small. We accelerate. Forget the phased approach. On Monday, I file for divorce with an emergency motion. We claim financial abuse. That Michael is restricting your access to funds, isolating you. We paint him as a controlling husband who uses money as a weapon. The frozen accounts are our proof. I could hear the rustle of papers. The cynicism was breathtaking. Financial abuse. 25 years of providing, of generosity, was about to be twisted into evidence of monstrosity. But he was never controlling. He was always generous. Then we frame it as a form of dependency. His gifts were a tool. He created total financial reliance. It's perfect. They were going to turn my love into a weapon, my care into pathology. And Veronica? She won't automatically take my side. She's a psychologist. She'll see right through it. And that's excellent, Daniel sneered. Her skepticism will be proof. We'll claim Michael has used psychological mechanisms to turn her against you. If a psychologist, his own daughter, expresses doubts, it becomes expert testimony about a toxic home environment. My hand clenched around my phone. They were going to use my daughter. They were going to weaponize her intelligence and her profession against me. They were going to try and make her a pawn in their game.
We file Monday, Daniel concluded. Emergency restraining order on assets. Temporary order of protection to keep him away from the house. By Wednesday, he'll be painted as a dangerous, controlling man who needs to be isolated. And if he fights back, we escalate. We allege harassment, stalking. The harder he resists, the more he looks like the aggressor. That's the beauty of family court. If the accused denies it, he's guilty. Margot laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Poor Michael. He has no idea what he started. 25 years playing the good husband, and now he'll find out what happens to nice guys. They spent another hour crafting their legend, planning their messaging, their meetings. For them, it was war. But they didn't know I was assembling an arsenal far more powerful than theirs. On Saturday morning, Margot met Veronica for their monthly brunch at the Golden Fork. But this time, Margot wasn't there as a mom. She was there as a victim, seeking not support, but an expert opinion. Frank, seated 2 booths away, sent me the transcript from his parabolic microphone. "Veronica, I need to talk to you about your father," Margot began, her voice laced with manufactured worry. "I think there's something wrong with him, mentally." "What specifically, Mom?" Veronica's voice was calm, clinical. She'd shifted into professional mode. "Control. Suspicion. He's restricting my access to money, citing security, but I think he's punishing me." "How long has this been going on?" "Months, maybe longer. I thought it was just stress, but yesterday he completely cut me off. I couldn't even pay for lunch." I held my breath. This was the moment. "Mom," Veronica said, her voice firm, "financial control can be a part of abuse, but sometimes it's asset protection, especially if there's a legal threat. What does Dad say?" Margot was flustered. Her script wasn't working. Instead of sympathy, she was getting a psychological evaluation. "He claims it's a standard bank procedure, but I've been with him for 25 years. This is definitely a punishment. I just don't know what. Maybe he found out I'm thinking about a divorce." "Wait," Veronica's tone sharpened. "You're asserting he's controlling you to prevent you from leaving. Or are you planning a divorce and he's simply protecting himself?" It was a direct hit. Too accurate. Too close to the bone. "I'm saying something is wrong with him. As a psychologist, you should see the signs." "As a psychologist, I'd say drastic changes in behavior always have a cause." "What happened 3 days ago?" Margot froze. Veronica was too sharp. Every question was a probe into a weak point in her story. "I don't know, and that's what scares me." Her voice became softer, weaker, but my daughter was now studying her like a subject, every pause, every micro-expression. "Mom, you're not asking for advice, you're asking for endorsement. You want me to pick a side."
"I won't do that. Talk to Dad. Don't ask me to diagnose him based on your narrative." The legend was crumbling. The psychologist's daughter had refused to play the pity game. She hadn't believed her. Margot left 20 minutes later, angry and humiliated. Her key witness had just testified for the defense. While this was happening, I got another call. Vic Morrison. "Mike, heard some interesting gossip. Shaw's in deep trouble. The Bar Association has opened an investigation." "On what grounds?" "Subcontractors are complaining he took client payments and never passed them on. Breach of fiduciary duty. Hearings next week. Guys scrambling for money to settle the debt. Over $2 million. It was the exact sum I'd seen in his financials. The house of cards was trembling.
I spent the next 3 hours on the phone. The electrician from Volt Pro was waiting on a payment since fall. The plumber from Windy City Plumbing hadn't been paid in nearly a year. A roofer was owed over $600,000 for a job finished in November. They all said the same thing. Shaw took payment from the client, then told the subcontractors the check was in the mail. By 1 p.m., I had a dossier, a pattern of deception, fraud, and theft. At 2:30 p.m., I called the Illinois State Bar Association. I'd like to file a complaint against attorney Daniel Shaw, systematic misconduct regarding client funds. I listed the sums, the names, the dates. 3 subcontractors agreed to testify. By 4 p.m., Daniel's office had received a formal notice to appear before a disciplinary committee. At 4:47 p.m., a text from Frank. Shaw just left his office carrying 3 boxes, got in his car, looks panicked. I didn't need him followed. I knew exactly where he was going, straight to Margot. When the system collapses, conspirators run to each other. Let them make more mistakes. I was just getting started. I sat in my office Sunday evening. A single lamp cast a soft glow over my desk. On the wall was a whiteboard, a timeline of their betrayal. Calls, transfers, meetings, names. Everything was falling into place. I just had to decide how to land the final blow to ensure they could never get up.
An email alert chimed. It was from Sylvia Owens. Subject: Draft Counter Strategy. I opened the attachment. It was a legally flawless, impeccably composed blueprint for a divorce that would leave me with everything. All shielded assets accounted for. On the last page was a summary. In case of judicial escalation, we advise filing a countersuit detailing moral pressure, preparation for illegal asset seizure, and attempted manipulation of a child to influence judicial outcomes. It wasn't just a document. It was a shield and a sword forged into one. Then a text came from Veronica. Dad, Mom is hysterical. She was screaming about you declaring war. What is happening? I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't tell her the whole truth. Not yet. It's okay, sweetheart. We're just working through some adult problems. I'll explain soon. She didn't push, but I knew she could feel the world cracking apart. Monday, 9:14 a.m., the phone rang. Michael Carter, this is the Cook County Circuit Court. You have been served. Your wife has petitioned for divorce and filed for a temporary restraining order for her safety and financial stability. A preliminary hearing is set for Wednesday. I wasn't surprised. Daniel had acted fast. He was scared I'd uncover his mess before he could sink his hooks into mine. 10 minutes later, another call. My company's accounting department.
Michael, cold. She demanded we transfer $70,000 to her personal account, said it was an emergency. What should we do? Don't touch a single cent without my written authorization. Understood? I looked out the window. The sun was shining. It looked like a normal day. But the official war had just begun. Wednesday, 10:27 a.m., courtroom 4B of the Cook County Courthouse. A few reporters, a couple of other lawyers, and her. Margot sat with her arms crossed, the picture of wounded piety. Next to her, Daniel Shaw in a sharp suit, a thick folder in his hands. I walked in, nodded to the judge, and sat next to Sylvia Owens. She silently handed me a printout of the hearing docket. The claims were already listed. emotional distress, financial isolation, threats to psychological well-being. The judge entered and opened the hearing. "Mrs. Carter, you've petitioned for temporary protective measures. Please outline your grievances." Margot spoke with poorly restrained tears. "My husband has completely cut me off from our funds. I can't even buy groceries. He refuses to communicate. He controls my movements. I fear for my emotional state. We live together, but he's become cold, frightening." I wanted to stand up, to scream, but Sylvia touched my elbow. "Not yet," she whispered. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Carter, your response." I stood. "Your Honor, all accounts in question are joint marital assets. I initiated a standard banking procedure to freeze them to protect those assets from potential illegal diversion of funds. I had reason to believe such attempts were being made. I have documentation."
I handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. On the first page was a statement showing a $50,000 transfer from her card to an account under Daniel Shaw's name. On the second, a receipt for an $8,000 handbag purchased on a day she'd asked me for money for her mother's medication. On the third, a transcript of the conversation I'd recorded where they discussed their strategy. The judge's eyebrows went up. "This is the basis for your suspicion?" "It is, Your Honor. Furthermore, I have filed a complaint with the Illinois State Bar Association. Mr. Shaw is currently under internal investigation for financial misconduct. There is reason to believe his actions in this proceeding are motivated by personal financial interest." Daniel flinched. The judge frowned. "Mr. Shaw, do you confirm this account exists?" "This is irrelevant to the current hearing," Daniel sputtered. "We are here to discuss domestic pressure. If you are a purported participant in financial schemes involving the petitioner and respondent's property, it is directly relevant." Margot shifted nervously in her seat. I didn't know it would cause all this. I just wanted some financial independence." "Independence," the judge repeated. "Then why transfers to your lawyer's account?"
She fell silent. Sylvia handed the judge a second folder. "We also have statements showing a series of transfers over the last 8 months to the same recipient, totaling over $300,000. And audio recordings where the petitioner and her representative discuss fabricating abuse allegations to gain unilateral control of assets." The courtroom went dead silent. The judge looked from us to Margot to a pale Daniel Shaw. "The petition for emergency relief is denied. The divorce proceedings are adjourned for 1 month. Both parties are ordered to provide full financial disclosure for all accounts, assets, correspondence, and actions over the last 12 months. He banged his gavel. I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for weeks. They wanted to play the victim, but they forgot that documents and facts speak louder than tears. The next day, Frank Russo called. "Michael, we found it. A second apartment on Dearborn Street. It's under a shell corporation, but the payments come from Shaw's account. And get this, a woman is living there, registered as the nanny for their child, the one Veronica doesn't trust." I tensed. "What's the suspicion?" "We think this apartment was bought for their future move. They were planning to take your granddaughter and start a new life on your dime." I stood up and walked to the window. The city roared below. My fist clenched, not just for me, but for my daughter. They wanted to take her family, paint me a tyrant, and slowly erase me from her life. "Frank,
Get a family law attorney on it. Look at all of Veronica's custody paperwork, who has access, who's listed. If there's a single document pointing to manipulation, we file for sole custody. The war had just escalated. Now I was fighting for my daughter. That morning, I drove to Veronica's apartment. She opened the door in her robe, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Hey, Dad, come in. Just so you know, Daniel didn't come home last night." I nodded. The apartment was quiet. My granddaughter was at preschool. The place felt fragile, held together by habit. "How are you?" I asked. "A mess. I feel everything crumbling. Mom's not answering her phone. Daniel's pretending everything's fine, but I know him. He's pale, he's jumpy. Dad, please, just tell me what's happening." I sat down opposite her and put my palms flat on the table. "Okay, I'll tell you." I told her everything, calmly, without anger. The frozen accounts, the recording, the conspiracy, the attempt to paint me as an abuser, their plan to use her, their secret love nest on Dearborn Street.
Her eyes glazed over. She listened in silence. It's true?" she finally whispered. I handed her the folder, copies of statements, a transcript of the audio, a photo from a security camera across the street showing Daniel and Margot leaving that apartment, laughing, carrying shopping bags. "Mom, with him." She put her face in her hands. I didn't rush her. Silence was better than words. "They were going to take my daughter," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They were going to use the courts to create a case. I'm too smart to play along, so I was a problem that needed to be neutralized." She looked up, and I saw a ferocity in her eyes that I hadn't seen since she was a little girl defending a friend from a bully. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm filing for sole custody. Let him try and prove he's a fit parent now." It was her decision, and I saw in her the same strength that had once built my company. A daughter who would not be trampled. 2 days later, Daniel's lawyer received a notice about the Bar Association hearing. 2 subcontractors agreed to testify. Sylvia smiled. If he's found culpable, he could be suspended. That makes any court case with him as her representative vulnerable. Any verdict can be appealed based on his misconduct.
That same day, my bank called. Shaw had tried to move money from Margot's frozen account to an offshore legal trust. The attempt failed, but it was logged. "Do you want us to send this to the state's attorney?" the manager asked. "Not yet. Just document it. We were playing the long game." The following week, I called Margot. A meeting. Just us. No lawyers, no hysterics. Neutral ground. We met at a quiet cafe we used to go to years ago. She arrived in a trench coat, her face tense, eyes wary. "Michael, what is this?" she asked, not sitting down. "Sit, let's talk." She perched on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt. "You're destroying everything," she said, her voice hard. "You're ruining my reputation, making me out to be a monster." I leaned forward. "You wanted to turn my 25 years of love into an abuse case. You wanted to use the courts to take everything I built. You and Daniel wanted to erase me, calmly, legally." She was silent. "But you miscalculated. You forgot who you were married to. I'm not a tyrant. I'm a builder, and I know how to stand on the foundation I laid myself."
"It wasn't me," she whispered. "It was him." "No, you're a grown woman. You made the choices. You transferred the money. You lied to our daughter." She was trembling. I wasn't pressuring her. I was just stating facts. "I'm offering you a chance. You sign a settlement. You drop all claims. You leave the business to me. The house stays with me. It was built pre-marriage. You get a compensation package I will determine. You live quietly, no court, no scandal. If you refuse, then it's public war, with the audio, with the bar complaints, with a fraud lawsuit." Margot looked away. "I thought you were soft. I thought it would be easy. You were wrong." Silence. A long, stretching silence. "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'll sign." A week later, it was done. A quiet, mutual consent divorce, no claims. The business stayed mine. The house stayed mine. The accounts were secured. The money she'd siphoned was deducted from her settlement. Daniel Shaw disappeared. The bar proceedings continued without him. He was eventually suspended, his reputation in tatters. A lawyer without trust is a carpenter without hands. I sat in my house in the chair Margot hated and looked at the fireplace where we'd once drank tea after bringing Veronica home from the hospital. I looked, and I felt not that I had won, but that I had not lost. I had defended myself not with rage, not with fists, but with my mind, methodically, firmly.
When the person you loved tries to erase you, you have two choices: fall down or stand up. I stood up, and I will never sit down again. Margot moved out of state. She wrote once, saying she needed a reset. I didn't respond. It was no longer my business. Veronica and my granddaughter moved in with me while her divorce was finalized. We fell into a routine, like when she was a kid. I made breakfast, she took my granddaughter to school. At night, we watched old movies and talked about how things could have been different. She never complained. She was strong like a mother, protective like a daughter, and grateful. One evening, she said, "Dad, you know, I used to think you were kind of boring." I laughed. "And now?" "Now I see how you can take a punch. You didn't scream, you didn't break things. You just put everyone in their place. I'm proud of you." It was more than a compliment. It was an absolution for all the unsaid things between a father and a daughter.
Months later, I found a plain cardboard box on my back porch. No note, no call. Inside was our wedding photo in a simple frame, and a single handwritten note on a piece of stationery. "You were the best of us, Michael. I just couldn't see it in time. Forgive me. M." I closed the box and looked up at the sky. No tears, just a light, dry warmth, like a wind passing through an empty house. Forgiveness isn't always something you say. Sometimes it's just choosing not to seek revenge. I'm rebuilding my lake house myself now. The paint, the roof, the shed. The work is slow, but it's honest. Frank Russo came by one weekend, now more a friend than an employee. You know, in my line of work, I see a lot of guys get broken. You're not one of them. You didn't just stand your ground. You turned around, dismantled the people coming for you, and you did it not with your fists, but with your head. That's what a real man does. I just smiled. Some things are better said in silence.
I'm 56 now. I live alone, in the house I built for a family. It's quieter, more peaceful, but it's not empty. I didn't become angrier or closed off. I just became precise. I understand more clearly now who is around me for gain and who is there because they value the man I am. Margot doesn't write. I don't expect her to. Veronica is nearby. My granddaughter is growing up. And I'm building a new terrace. By myself. No helpers.
And you know what? I am happy. This was my story of betrayal and the quiet, calculated justice that followed. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about protecting what was mine. It was about rebuilding a foundation when someone tried to blow it up. So tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying comeback or moment of justice you've ever witnessed? Have you ever had to stand your ground against someone you thought you could trust? Let me know. And if this story resonated with you, if you believe in standing up for yourself, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of real-life resilience, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Thanks for watching. Stay strong.